The New York Rangers rebound from a disappointing performance in their most recent game, and they take care of business in Columbus against the Blue Jackets, controlling play for a full 60 minutes and coming away with the 4-0 shutout win. We're going to break down everything that happened in that game. 20-save shutout for Igor Shesterkin, and I also want to focus in on a couple of the newer New York Rangers. That will be Patrick Kane and Nico Mikkola. Going to talk about each of them in today's episode as well. Welcome back, Blue Shirts fans, to episode number 802 of the Locked On New York Rangers podcast. I'm your host, John Chick. Just want to thank you guys, as always, for making Locked On New York Rangers your first listen every day. We are free and available on all platforms, and today's episode of Locked On New York Rangers is brought to you by HelloFresh. Skip trips to the grocery store and count on HelloFresh to make home cooking easy, fun, and affordable. That's why it's America's #1 meal kit. Go to HelloFresh.com/NHL60 and use code NHL60 for 60% off plus free shipping. And yeah, I figure we might as well just go ahead, jump right into it. The theme of this game to me was the Rangers playing a complete 60. There wasn't ever really a time in this game where the Blue Jackets got much of anything going. I thought the Rangers defended very well, and in a lot of cases, that good defense led directly to some scoring chances, and in some instances, some goals for the Rangers. At least 3 of the goals that the Rangers scored in this game were the direct result of the Rangers making good defensive plays, and we'll get to that in due time. But as far as just kind of like a general look at this game, yeah, I think coming into this, after what happened against the Blues, where the Rangers were obviously a half step slow, you're looking for a faster start, you're looking for guys to skate better, just more time in the offensive zone, a little bit more physicality maybe. This wasn't the most physical game ever, but I thought it was a little bit more physical than the one that came before it. And I think we pretty much got everything that I just mentioned there. And for the third time in the last 4 games, the Rangers get off to a really fast start, hit the ground running, built a lead, and just didn't look back. The only game that they didn't start fast was against the Blues. It's somewhat understandable because they were playing the second game of a back-to-back. The first one was at home against the Lightning, just an electric atmosphere in Madison Square Garden. Rangers, in a war against the Tampa Bay Lightning, and then, kind of an underwhelming opponent, and the Rangers lost that game to the Blues. That loss, though, against the Blues, it probably bothered me less than any other loss that the Rangers have had this season. I just thought they were kind of victim of circumstance, and I understand you still got to find a way to get up for these games and put your best foot forward and all that good stuff, but, just weren't able to do it that night. I always look to the game after that. How do you bounce back? And the Rangers bounce back in excellent fashion in this game. You look at this entire game as a whole, there is not much to nitpick as far as the Rangers are concerned. I know they went 0 for 2 on the power play, but what happens? They only had 2 chances. There was really nothing negative coming out of this game for the New York Rangers. I think pretty much everybody contributed to this win. And again, not the best of opponents, but you still have to play well. The Rangers did that. They took nothing for granted. They obviously up against a team that is not going to be going to the playoffs and probably at this point can't wait for the season to end, but they still went out there and they got the job done. You do have to play well in this league. You're not going to win on talent alone, at least not on most nights. And while we're on the subject here, talking about the Blue Jackets, Sam Rosen said something early in this game that I thought was hilarious. I don't think he was trying to be mean or disrespectful or anything like that, but he was talking about the Blue Jackets, and I laughed a lot when he said this. So I wrote down what he said here. He goes, "The Blue Jackets, it's just been a miserable season for them." Like, the way he said it, it was just it was like the most unintentionally funny thing that he's probably ever said. And, it's true. It's just been a really rough season. They got Gaudreau in the offseason, and obviously it hasn't really led to a whole lot of anything for them. But, again, the Rangers going out, taking care of business. I mentioned the fast start. That was, illustrated by the fact that they were just skating very well, spending a lot of time in the offensive zone. But then, of course, the more tangible way, they scored 2 goals in the first period, both of them happening about midway through the first. And we'll break down those goals in due time here. But I do want to spend a good portion of today's episode talking about Patrick Kane here. He was back into the lineup for the first time, missed a handful of games. Like Gerard Gallant said, I think the Rangers mostly just being precautious. And, he's had that hip issue. And, Gallant even mentioned that, if it was the playoffs, he didn't use the word playoffs, but he said this time next week, Patrick Kane would be out there and he would be playing. So I think it makes sense to exercise caution. We saw them do that with Ryan Lindgren. They did it for a little while here now with Patrick Kane. Hopefully he's back and he's ready to go. And as far as the line combinations are concerned, they did pretty much about what you would expect here. They went with Kreider, Mika, Kane from left to right. That was your top line. Second line, you had from left to right, Panarin, Trocheck, and Tarasenko. Then, of course, the kid line. And then, of course, Vesey, Goodrow, and Mott as the fourth line. One interesting other wrinkle that they made is when Kane was out of the lineup, they had Vladimir Tarasenko playing in his spot on the top power play unit over on the right side there. And even before that happened, even before Kane got hurt and had to come out of the lineup, I mentioned the fact that because we were trying to figure out, what should the top 2 power play units be? Who should be on what unit, and which 10 players deserve to be part of the power play on this team? And the only tweak that I wanted them to make was dropping Kane from the first unit to the second unit. I thought he could kind of take the bull by the horns there. He'd be out there with Hedel and Lafreniere and a lot of young players, and he'd kind of lead the way for those guys and really start to assert himself. Whereas, Tarasenko on the top line, I just want Tarasenko out there because I think he's played great with the Rangers. And I think that, if you're not going to have that line of Mika centering Panarin and Tarasenko, which I thought looked spectacular not that long ago, if they're not going to be playing together regular strength, then at least maybe get them out there on the power play. But they didn't do that. They put Kane right back into his usual spot on the top power play unit, and Tarasenko dropped down to the second unit. I still would rather have Tarasenko there. I think he's clearly played better than Patrick Kane. He's been more assertive than Patrick Kane, and that kind of leads me into what I want to talk about here, and that's just kind of Patrick Kane as a whole. Overall, he hasn't done that bad with the Rangers. If you just go by the stats, I have his stat page open over here. 17 games, 5 goals, 6 assists. So 11 points in 17 games. It's not like a totally anemic total. It's not like he hasn't had, a nice moment here and there since he's been a Rangers. But again, this is something that I talked about before he got injured. I'm just not seeing Patrick Kane, the best American-born player ever, the 3-time Stanley Cup champion, the slam dunk Hall of Famer, the guy that's going to be up there on a lot of the all-time lists as far as, most points and most games played and most playoff games played and, the 3 championships that I already mentioned. I'm just not really seeing it. He just looks a little bit tepid out there. And I think there was one play that illustrated that in last night's game better than anything else. There was a play in the third period, and I think at this point it was still just 2-0 Rangers. And the Rangers look to be in control of this game, but you don't know. They, a 2-goal lead is never safe in hockey. And the Rangers get sort of a late developing 2-0 break because Mika Zibanejad, by the time that Mika and also Patrick Kane were in the clear here, Mika had the puck on the left side, and he was getting pretty close to the Columbus blue line. I almost said the Columbus Blue Jacket. That doesn't make sense. He's getting close to the Columbus blue line. He carries the puck over the blue line. He's got Kane to his right. They're going toward the net. Mika with a nice pass to Patrick Kane. I think I couldn't have been the only Ranger fan that was sitting there waiting for him to pull the trigger, waiting for him to shoot the puck there. Instead, he tries to pass back to Mika Zibanejad, and it does not work. The Rangers don't even really get much of a shot attempt away after Kane made this pass here. And, the announcers, Sam and Joe, and there could be some merit to this, but they talked about the idea that, Mika's on 39 goals. Patrick Kane's aware of that. He wants to, try to get Mika up to 40 goals, certainly before the season ends here. I guess that's possible, but, you can't be worrying about stuff like that. We're trying to win a hockey game here and, increase the lead up to 3-0. And at that point, not that the game's over, but it's looking a lot better. And just, the decision-making here by Patrick Kane. And I don't want to go crazy over one play, but to me, it kind of just illustrates how it's been since he's gotten here. So again, this 2-0, Mika passes to his right to Kane. Kane's got the puck. You're waiting for him to pull the trigger. Kane, when he passes puck back to Mika, like I said, this is a late developing 2-0 and 2-1-0. And the reason that that's important is because, they're running out of time here. They're running out of space to work with because it didn't become a 2-0 until the Rangers, carried the puck over the blue line there. And by the time Kane's got this puck, he's got to shoot. There's no time to pass it back to Mika Zibanejad. By the time Kane gets the puck, passes back to Mika, Mika's momentum is going to be taking him past the net. He's not even going to be able to get the shot away, and that's pretty much what happened here. It just wasn't going to work. Kane had a far better chance of scoring if he just pulled the trigger here than Mika would have even if Kane made a perfect pass here and completed it back to him, because by the time Mika got this puck, once again, he was going to be basically past the Columbus net. So don't know why Kane didn't shoot there, and again, he's done okay since he's come to the Rangers, and I'm still completely in favor of the move. I'm glad he's here. When you have a chance to get Patrick Kane, the slam dunk Hall of Famer and all the other things that I already mentioned that he is, and you only have to give up a second-round pick, a conditional second, and a fourth, you got to make that happen. And, there's some people that, didn't want the move to happen in the first place, and, why is Kane here? We'd be better off without him. That's a bridge too far as well, because if Patrick Kane wasn't on this team, you'd probably have, I would say, probably Jimmy Vesey. Either him or Goodrow would be playing on the second line right now. Not that that's like a death sentence or anything, but there were a lot of people that weren't a fan of that either. Vesey and Goodrow playing in the top 6. So you'd have one of them in the top 6, and you might have Jake Lecision in the lineup. Who do you want on this team right now going into the playoffs? Patrick Kane or Jake Lecision? The answer is pretty obvious. So, yeah, I mean, I'm still glad he's here. I'm just looking for him to be a little bit more aggressive out there, be a little bit more assertive, and be that guy. And I wonder sometimes, too, him going from the Chicago Blackhawks to the New York Rangers, he was synonymous with Chicago Blackhawks hockey. He's lived there forever. He's been through ups and downs with that team. Obviously, a few more ups than downs, to be sure, winning 3 championships. But is he having a tough time? Just like is it weird for him being a Ranger? Did he kind of leave his mind in Chicago? Is there a part of him that kind of wishes maybe he was still there? I don't know. I mean, it's all just purely open speculation. Something that it reminds me of, and I did not plan on talking about this, but it kind of just popped into my head as I was discussing this here. So we're going to switch to baseball just for a second, and then we'll get back to the Rangers. There's got to be some Yankee fans listening to this because, there's, New York sports fans, it's either Yankees or Mets in baseball, and, hockey, it's Rangers, Islanders. And I feel like a lot of Ranger fans are Yankee fans, and maybe Islander fans or Mets fans. But regardless, it kind of reminds me of when the Yankees went out in free agency and they got Jason Giambi. Giambi in Oakland, he was the guy there, and it was kind of like this team of renegades and Moneyball and all that stuff. Then he comes over to the Yankees. He's got to, cut his hair, shave his beard, and he's in a new environment. And now he's joining a team with tremendously established players and slam dunk Hall of Famers, Derek Jeter, Mariano Rivera, Jorge Posada, the list goes on. And it just felt like he didn't really know how to carry himself or how to fit in right away after being, like I said, the guy over there with Oakland. And it could be a little bit the same thing with Patrick Kane here. The Rangers had that deep playoff run last year. They got the kid line. All those guys are really tight. Mika and Kreider are obviously very close, and they're 2 of the leaders on this team. And Kane, he wasn't the captain there, but he was one of the alternate captains in Chicago. I don't know. Maybe there's something where he's just kind of still feeling his way out as far as, fitting in with the team and fitting in with the culture. We'll see how this whole thing shakes out in the end. And none of this is going to matter. He can erase all doubt that any of us have ever had here if he goes out there and kills it in the playoffs and leads the Rangers to where they want to go. But, yeah, right now I just want to see that version of Patrick Kane, that version that we've seen throughout his career, and that version that you got to believe at the age of 34 is still there. He's just got to find a way to pull it out of himself. And, I'd like to see it, ideally, these last 2 games here, but if not there, certainly in the playoffs, because that's when it's really going to count. We're going to keep everything rolling in just a second here. I want to give some props to Nico Mikkola. He got his first goal of the season here, and I think played very well in this game in general. And also want to give some credit to the coaching staff for something that they did in this game. And we'll get to all that good stuff in just a second. But first, we got to let everybody know that today's episode of Locked On New York Rangers is brought to you by FanDuel. Grand slams, no-hitters, and double plays are back. And there's no better place to get in on the MLB action than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. That's because right now, new customers can step up to the plate with a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000. Just go to FanDuel.com/lockedon, sign up, place your first bet, and get up to $1,000 back in bonus bets if you do not win. So don't miss your chance to get a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000 when you join FanDuel today. Just go to FanDuel.com/lockedon to sign up. FanDuel, official partner of Major League Baseball. All right, we just want to thank you guys, as always, for making Locked On New York Rangers your first listen every day. We are free and available on all platforms. One other thing, I talked about Kane a second ago. One other little caveat here that kind of coincides with him being back in the lineup. That drops Nico Mikkola from the first line down to the third line, or pairing rather, first pairing down to the third pairing, and it knocks Ben Harper out of the lineup, which is unfortunate, but just kind of a necessary evil. I mean, you're not going to play Harper. I know there's some Ranger fans that like Harper better than Mikkola. I feel like in recent games, down the stretch here, Mikkola separated himself a little bit from Ben Harper, but I'm a huge Ben Harper fan, so I do feel for him. It's a cool story that he was almost out of the league and carved out a nice role for himself on the New York Rangers here. But it's also nice knowing that if any of the Ranger defensemen goes down with an injury in the playoffs, knock on wood, that we've got somebody that you would think would be ready to go jump into the lineup there. But we'll see. So something, I mentioned this a second ago, that I want to give the New York Ranger coaching staff credit for is the distribution of ice time that we saw in this game. Nobody got run into the ground, and nobody was kind of left out in the cold. There was nobody with 28 minutes of ice time. There was nobody with 6 or 7 minutes of ice time. It was very evenly distributed, and I think that's a good way to do it right now for a couple of reasons. First of all, basically everybody on this New York Ranger team is playing well right now. So who doesn't deserve to get some ice time? And I know there's times where, earlier in the season, Gerard Gallant would put out the fourth line in a situation that maybe didn't make sense. Maybe it was getting late in the game and the Rangers were down by a goal. You need to score. And it's not the best time to put the fourth line out there. But the way this team is constructed right now, everybody deserves to be on the ice, or at least a fairly good amount of time. And what I thought was very interesting here is the small amount of time among the Ranger forwards as far as who got the most minutes and who got the fewest minutes. So the Ranger forward with the most minutes in this game was actually Filipino, which is cool, and it's nice to see that the kid line is getting rewarded for the way that they've played. Filipino leading the way for the Rangers with 17 minutes and 38 seconds of ice time. And that despite the fact that he only got a minute 10 on the power play and 18 seconds on the penalty kill. So it's not like he's out there for, a ton of time when it comes to special teams. So he led the way with 17:38 overall. And somehow Tarasenko, and maybe this is just, Gallant looking to rest the veteran and make sure he's ready to go for the playoffs. But Tarasenko actually had the fewest amount of minutes for any New York Ranger forward with 12 minutes and 27 seconds. So you've got only about a 5-minute difference as far as the Ranger forward with the most ice time and the Ranger forward with the least ice time. And I think that's a really good way to go right now. Once again, because everybody's playing well and nobody deserves to be left out in the cold, but also because the playoffs are coming around. You don't want to run anybody into the ground, and you also don't want anybody out there for just a handful of shifts because you want to make sure that everybody's ready to go when the playoffs start. Just a really good, complete team win here. Everybody contributing and making the most out of the minutes that they're given. And as far as the defensemen are concerned, pretty even, share here as well. Adam Fox, he's always going to kind of be the workhorse for the most part, but he was out there for 23 minutes and 10 seconds. He had the most ice time for any Ranger defenseman. And then as far as the least amount of ice time, that would be Nico Mikkola. He was out there for 17:25. So not too much of a difference there either, and I think it's a good time of the year to do that, especially given how well that the team has played. I just mentioned Nico Mikkola. Let's talk about Mikkola in some greater detail here. He was involved in quite a bit in this game. He's been kind of all over the ice in recent games, and there was actually a game, I think it was against the Devils, where he came close to scoring on a couple of different occasions. I mentioned him a second ago, too, where I think that he's separated himself from Ben Harper at least a little bit, and I think the Rangers were always planning on going with Nico Mikkola as their sixth defenseman. Once that trade with the Blues was complete, of course, Mikkola coming over with Vladimir Tarasenko. But Mikkola was involved in kind of a weird play in this game. It was late in the second period. So Robertson basically ran into Mikkola at open ice, right in the neutral zone there. Mikkola, I don't even think saw him coming. They called a 5-minute major on Nico Mikkola. And, Sam and Joe were wondering how exactly this works because they went to review it. Can they reduce it from a 5-minute major to a 2-minute minor? Can they wipe out the entire penalty? This doesn't happen often enough where honestly even I know all these little intricate rules for sure. But apparently, yes, you can review it and change a 5-minute major to nothing, no penalty at all. And that's what they did here because Mikkola didn't do anything. He got run into. And, I'm not trying to make light of it because Robertson was obviously shaken up on the play. Looked like he hit his head a little bit. And, obviously I hope that he's okay. But just kind of a strange situation because had they called Mikkola for a 2-minute minor in this situation instead of the 5-minute major, this would not be reviewable. So Mikkola would have gone to the penalty box and the Rangers would have been shorthanded. It's just kind of a weird situation there. And, I don't know if that's something that the NHL wants to take a look at. I don't want there to be a situation where the NHL is reviewing every single penalty. That would get very tired very fast. But yeah, just kind of ironic that because they falsely called it a 5-minute major, they were able to take a look at it and then wipe out the penalty altogether. So I just thought that was kind of interesting. And as far as how to handle that in the future, I think the NHL has to at least have a conversation about, those kinds of rules in the offseason. But Mikkola in general, just playing very physical hockey. He's another guy, I've credited Ben Harper for this, but anytime there's a skirmish, Mikkola's right in the middle of it with everybody. It's funny because when you see a skirmish and Nico Mikkola's on the ice, he doesn't he's not out of control. He's not usually, yelling at somebody all that much. But I've noticed a couple different times where there'll be, a get together and everybody's pushing and shoving. And again, he's not overly animated during it. What he does though, he's so big, he'll just grab somebody's shirt collar with one hand and just kind of hold them there and just not let go of them. And he's not usually talking that much. And he doesn't talk. He just stares right into their soul. That's what Nico Mikkola does. Grabs them by the shirt collar, stares into their soul, and doesn't let them go and doesn't let them do whatever they're trying to do there. But a good guy to have on the ice for sure when it all breaks down and you get some pushing and shoving and some extracurriculars. But yeah, again, he's done a nice job for the Rangers since coming over. I think I'm one of a lot of Ranger fans who he's kind of won over slowly but surely, as the games have gone on here. And I think his style, once again, is going to play very well in the postseason. He was not part of that Blues team that won the Stanley Cup, but he's a big, tough, physical defenseman who just looks built to play postseason hockey. I think it's pretty much as simple as that. And something really nice that Adam Fox said about Nico Mikkola as well, because, Ryan Lindgren missed a handful of games, more than a handful. I mean, it was double-digit games that Ryan Lindgren missed recently. Then he came back for the one game, missed a couple more. He seems to be good to go now. But, Adam Fox really put over Nico Mikkola and how well he played, because they had Mikkola up on the top pairing with Adam Fox. And I thought the two of them, figured it out pretty quickly. So that was nice of Adam Fox to do there. But in a perfect world, Ryan Lindgren's in the lineup. He's with his BFF, Adam Fox, there. And Mikkola's on the third pairing with Braden Schneider. And I think those two have figured it out too. When Mikkola first came over, thought the two of them were struggling to get on the same page, at least the first couple of games there, which is not to be completely unexpected. But regardless, I think they look a lot better now. And very cool to see Nico Mikkola get his first goal in this game. We get the Mika to Mikkola call. Mika to Mikkola. I can barely even say it right now, and I know what happened. Mika passing to Mikkola. Basically, who got the secondary? I think it was Kane. Yeah, Kane to Mika Zibanejad. Mika into the offensive zone. Mika was going toward the net. Basically, the entire Blue Jackets team went toward Mika Zibanejad on this play. And then Mika with a really slick pass back to his left. And Mika is on the doorstep there. He crashed the net. He tips it home, and he gets the goal, makes it 3-0. So very, very cool to see Mikkola get his first goal of the season. I think well-deserved. And again, obviously, the reason why the Rangers made that deal with the Blues first and foremost was to get Vladimir Tarasenko and address an area of weakness, that being right wing. But don't sleep on Nico Mikkola. I think he's added a lot of valuable depth there, and I think he's played very, very well down the stretch with the Rangers. Somebody that seems to continue to be getting more and more comfortable with his new team, and he looks ready to go for the playoffs. We will keep this thing rolling in just a second here. I want to talk a little bit about Igor Shesterkin pitching a shutout and a couple of crazy road stats that they showed after the game once this one was complete, and we will get to all that good stuff in just a second. All right, so we did an episode not too long ago. I think it was like last week, maybe early last week. We were coming down the stretch here. We're getting down to being about 5 games or so left in the regular season for the Rangers. Of course, now we're down to 2. But in that episode, I discussed a couple of things that I wanted to see from the New York Rangers, down the stretch here, the rest of the regular season. Just a couple of, random things, some that are, obviously more important than others. But one of the more specific things that I threw out there, as far as something I wanted to see from the Rangers down the stretch this season, I wanted to see Igor Shesterkin not only continue to play the best hockey that he's played all season, which he has, but I wanted to see him get a shutout. And he did it. He got his 20-save shutout here, his third shutout of the season. 2 of his 3 shutouts have been fairly recently, and even with 3 shutouts, that seems like kind of a low number for Igor Shesterkin, especially when you look at what he did last year. But nevertheless, Igor Shesterkin was very, very good in this game. He wasn't tested a whole lot, but he was there making the saves when he had to make the saves. And a couple of really nice saves down the stretch in this game to preserve the shutout. Columbus had a power play. Igor made a really nice glove save. The puck later on the same power play deflected off of Keandre Miller's skate, and Igor stuck out his left pad really quickly to make a toe save there. Really, really alert on that play. Nice save. And then a deflection attempt by the Blue Jackets with 3:30 left. Igor adjusted very quickly on that play as well. And he actually got some help earlier in the game from Nico Mikkola, who we just got done talking about. There was a situation where Jackets took a shot. Igor got his glove on it, and it kind of popped into the air, pretty much went straight up. Nico Mikkola was there, and he basically just went up and just swatted it out of there. Looked like a volleyball spike almost, but he just had to get it out of the crease and away from the net as quickly as he could, and basically just improvised and did a great job there. But yeah, Igor Shesterkin gets a shutout here. The reason I wanted to see the shutout is I just want to see Igor Shesterkin firing on all cylinders, looking at his very best, giving nightmares to the opposition. Like, I want that Igor factor where teams look at him and it's like, oh my God, how are we ever going to get the puck by this guy? And I think we're starting to get there. Like I said, I don't have his game logs in front of me. Maybe I can pull them up really quickly here, but he's played just, outstanding hockey down the stretch here. It's approaching what he did last season. And of course, last season, a historic season for Igor Shesterkin. Yeah, I've got his last 4 games or last 5 games open here. There's probably a way to, okay, game logs. Let's see. So yeah, in this most recent game, Igor Shesterkin allows 0 goals. Obviously, he got the shutout. The game before that, he allowed 3 goals. Game before that, 2 goals. Game before that, 2 goals. Game before that, 2 goals. Game before that, 1 goal. Game before that, 3 goals. Game before that was also a shutout. And the game before that was 2 goals. So Doing some quick math here, if you all just bear with me for 1 second. In his last 9 games, Igor Shesterkin has allowed 2 goals or fewer in 7 of them, and he has not allowed more than 3 goals in any of them, and he's also got 2 shutouts in there as well. So Igor Shesterkin, like I said, this is the best stretch of hockey that we've seen from him all season, and no reason not to think, not to hope, not to expect that Igor Shesterkin is going to carry this right into the postseason. Very much looking forward to that. I figured I wanted to end today's episode by sharing a couple of stats that they actually showed during the post-game broadcast last night, because the Rangers, with this win last night, that was their last road game of the regular season. The final 2 games will both be at home, and some of these stats are very impressive and borderline crazy here, so I got them in my phone here. The Rangers, for the season, their record on the road, 24-9-8. So they only lost 9 games in regulation all season. That's tremendously impressive. They also got 56 points on the road this year. That is tied for the second most in New York Ranger history. Another very impressive stat. They scored 3.24 goals per game on the road while allowing just 2.49 goals per game on the road. So they outscored their opponents on the road by about 3/4 of a goal per game. They had a plus 31 goal differential, and in their last 9 road games, or I guess that would be, yeah, they clearly made a mistake on this graphic, because it says in their last 9 road games, they went 6-1-3. That would be 10 games. So in their last 10 games, they went 6-1-3. I'm not the best, I'm not any kind of mathologist here, but I can do 6 + 1 + 3 fairly easily. But anyway, yeah, I mean, obviously a really nice end to the road portion of the regular season, I guess we can call it. And now we turn our attention to the final 2 games for the Rangers here. Going to be interesting to see, how they play everything down the stretch here. If anybody gets a rest day, or they try to limit somebody's ice time, or anything along those lines. But yeah, Rangers going to be in action at home against the Buffalo Sabres on Monday. The Sabres cannot make the playoffs, so it's kind of a meaningless game for them. I hate saying meaningless, but in a way it kind of is. And then the Rangers also play at home against the Maple Leafs on Thursday. And to do a quick standings check here, I want to go ahead and bring up the standings here. The Rangers, obviously now still in 3rd place in the Metro, and they have 106 points in 80 games. They trail the 2nd-place Devils, who have 108 points in 80 games. And then leading the Metro, the Canes, they have 109 points in 79 games. So the Canes up by a point on the Devils, up by 3 points on the Rangers, but they have a game in hand against both of those teams. And as far as the Rangers potentially passing the Devils for 2nd place, getting home ice in the first round, it could still happen, but it's a situation where if the Devils win one more game, they are going to get home ice, because that would put them with 110 points. The Rangers could still tie them by winning both of their last 2 games. They both have 110 points in that scenario, but the Devils would have more regulation wins. Or no, they would actually have the same amount of regulation wins, which is the first tiebreaker, but the Devils would have more regulation plus overtime wins, basically wins that do not include the shootout. So if they finish with the same amount of points, if I'm understanding this correctly, the Devils would end up with home ice advantage. The only exception there is if the Devils, in their last 2 games, if they lose both of them in overtime, that would get them to 110 points. And if the Rangers win both of their last 2 games, that would get them to 110 points. At that point, the Rangers would have more regulation wins than the Devils, and they would have home ice advantage in the first round. You got all that? Good. So regardless, it certainly looks like we're getting Rangers-Devils. It's probably going to be Devils having home ice advantage, but whatever. The Ranger fans will just invade that arena anyway, and we'll get some Let's Go Ranger chants. We'll get some Pop Van Sucks chants. Maybe the fans can even sing the goal song. We've seen that a couple of times in the past as well, including last year against the Canes in the playoffs on the road. But that will pretty much do it for today, guys. Once again, if you'd like to get in touch with this podcast, please send an email to lockedonnyrangers@gmail.com. Once again, that is lockedonnyrangers@gmail.com. And definitely give us a follow on Twitter as well, @LO_NY_Rangers. Once again, it's @LO_NY_Rangers. And definitely subscribe to the Locked On New York Rangers YouTube channel. Thanks again, guys. I'll see you next time. Thanks for making Locked On New York Rangers your first listen every day. Now make your second listen game-to-game NHL. Every moment, every top performance, every result, Locked On Game to Game covers every game from across the NHL with local analysis that only Locked On can deliver. Follow Game to Game on Locked On NHL. Available on the Odyssey app, YouTube, and wherever you get your podcasts.